actually now have in this club 6 members who have had polio. So it seems to be an appropriate subject to talk about, since always it's an important subject in Rotary. And Rotary, God bless them, that has worked so hard and so long and so successful at eradicating polio. We much appreciate that. And what we want to do too, though, is focus on those people that have polio. They call them survivors, which they are, not necessarily the best word. Sometimes they call them victims, which is probably a very bad word. I don't like that at all. And I'm one of them now at this moment. So, and oftentimes there's so much focus on eradication.
Ken obviously has some connectivity problems. Okay. Mona, you're the host now. Yeah.
Are we ready for our panel discussion?
Go for it, Mona.
Yes. This is a panel discussion on people who have had polio. Many of us here today have had polio, and I would like to just as I've introduced myself in the earlier today, I am a person who had polio. Both my brother and I had polio at 14 months old. He recovered 100%, and till today he is doing absolutely fine. I do not want to talk to him about post-polio because he doesn't have it. He has no effects from polio, but I was left with lower limb involvement. And then 33 years later, I got post-polio syndrome. And I would like to pass on to our next member on the panel, who is here to talk about their polio. And who would that be next?
You choose, Mona.
I choose. Well, I was hoping, John, how would you like to tell us about your initial polio?
Right, fine. Polio, September 1949, 18 months old, paralyzed to the point that there wasn't any iron lungs. So they had to actually keep me alive for some days by putting a mask over my face and actually assisting me to breathe. I am paralyzed from just below the diaphragm, and I have weakened lungs as well. And my right arm is just for your Ken's back. I'm also mostly paralyzed in my right arm as well. It's caused me to go around with what you call in America braces. We call calipers and crutches for donkey's years, until I got up to about the age of 35, and then post-polio hit, and I started to have to use a wheelchair. And nowadays I'm dependent upon it. In fact, it's my freedom. I get around, I go everywhere, I do everything. I even cooked dinner for Ken a few months ago. So you know, we go through from there. PPS has hit, and it's on an inexorable slowdown or downward spiral. Just for those of you who don't know, post-polio syndrome comes along anything from 15 to odd years plus. it is incurable. It is just one of those things. It is a breakdown of the neurons, and it keeps going down and down and down.
Sorry about that. And one of the pleasures of being in Colombia is sometimes the internet's not so good. So thank you for taking while I was disappeared for a few minutes. And it's a pleasure to have you all here. Mona's from Canada, John's from Ireland, Constance, we don't know where she's from, but she claims to be from Las Vegas. I'm still working on his name, but I'm going to try my best here. Falarami is from from England, but he actually is originally from Nigeria. And Nima, I pinned you also. Nima is from the Congo. So it's interesting to talk about polio from a kind of a different country, kind of a setting. And John, my question to you, because you're the historian here, is do you still have? All these 5 people still have polio?
Yes.
Once you have polio, you've got it for life. The virus is not inactive. Sorry, the virus isn't active. It passes. It's a gastroenteritic. It passes through the gut and disappears in, say, 6 weeks. It has struck thousands of people around the world. There were 388,000 polio victims, survivors, whatever you like to call them. In different languages, you have different names. In 1988, 388,000 people were paralyzed by polio. There are a lot of people who also land up getting post-polio who never knew they had polio, because sometimes what happens is it goes through, it lands up, it gives people flu-like symptoms, or maybe just partial weakness for a while, and then donkey's years later, they suddenly develop post-polio. We did a study a while back on twins who were involved with polio in Sweden, and we quite often found that the siblings in latter years who had not developed or appeared to have developed polio were coming up with exactly the same symptoms as people who had developed full symptoms. So with paralysis, so it's one of those things. And we did the study on twins with the Karolinska Institute, but it can happen with other people. And I have been to, and I've spoken at Rotary conferences around Europe and various other places. Quite often you'll get Rotarians coming up, and they'll say, I don't know why they're so shy. Quite often, a lot of them turn around and say, "Well, I had polio as a child, but it it's still not apparent. I don't get any problems with it, and I don't let people on. But it's nice to see somebody talking about it." Why Rotarians don't talk, I've got no idea. They need to be more open, because the more open they are, the more people will realize. Also, the thing that's happening is in Europe, in North America, Australia, we're all, as you can see looking around this screen, apart from 1 or 2, getting a little older, or a lot older in my case. But the average age in Europe is around about 68 years old for polio survivors. But there is a huge problem coming up. Polio may be nearly eradicated. We may still get the odd occasion coming up in Pakistan, Afghanistan. But there are, with the study that was done with Professor Tony Olio in 2018, we estimate there are around something in the region of 20 to 23 million polio survivors around the world, and the problems are really going to hit in sub-Saharan Africa and in the Indian subcontinent. And it's coming up there. That's where the problems are going to be in the future. And we of our generation are beholden to pass on the information and the knowledge that we've got in how to cope and coping mechanisms to the up and coming generation of polio survivors who are developing post-polio syndrome.
Very good. Thank you, John. And I'd like to turn over to Verlamami, a question to him. And forgive me, it took me a month to get to know my wife's name when I first met her too. So just the way I am. But you grew up in Nigeria with polio.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what it was like to grow up in that country with polio?
Yeah, I had polio at 4 months of 4 months of age, and I was actually paralyzed. I was actually paralyzed, and through the time I had the polio, I wasn't conscious of the polio itself. I just knew I was getting sick. Each time I'm always in the hospital and all that. Even when I went to primary school, I did not regard myself as someone with polio. I just felt, oh, it's the normal sickness and every other thing. But I couldn't walk. I was wondering what's going on. Others could walk. I couldn't walk. But I think later, I knew, I think I stood up and walked, but I was paralyzed in one part of my leg. And I always wanted to do what the people that are actually able could do. And then I think I got conscious of the polio itself when I got to, I think it was higher school, and people would call me all sorts of names. And I was wondering, I thought I'm able. I thought I could do every other thing that everybody was doing. So it was a glaring thing. I was being um, taken away from active roles. Maybe people are doing sport, one particular sport or the other, and they tell me I can't do it. I begin to ask myself questions. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes. Just remind
Okay.
everybody to mute yourself so we can focus on the speakers. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, and I begin to ask myself questions that what's going on? Why am I being taken away from participating in every other sporting activities? And that was when it came to my consciousness that okay, I'm disabled. That's I was wondering that why are these people different from myself? And my consciousness came in that I was disabled, and each time I cry. I cry in the sense that the Nigerian system itself make you look as if you're a beggar, a cost to society, you can amount to nothing. But I just want to thank my parents and then my siblings. They actually gave me the best of everything I wanted, you know, and I wasn't different. I wasn't treated different. But oftentimes when I go out, is the people outside I tend to begin to tell me you're disabled. It kind of put that stigma on me, and it really felt I really had a very, very bad, let me say, the way the society handled that polio, it actually troubled me. I had depression, I had panic attack, I had anxiety, and it was really, really, really that bad. So the society itself in Nigeria, it's not encouraging at all, at all. But because I had a good family that was ready to support, that was the only people I actually could go back to. And at the end of everything, I came to England, and then when I came to England, it's a different thing from Nigeria. The way the people living with disability are being taken care of is different from Nigeria, because I think um, the health system we have it here in the UK and every other thing, but back in Nigeria, it's as if being disabled is the end of the life of that person. Thank you.
Yeah, much appreciated. And Constance. So all of you contracted polio. So it was something that, a disability that basically happened to you, as opposed to sometimes people just born with polio. I mean, you were all very young when you got it. But I would imagine you go through some sort of a thinking process about maybe there's a regrets that you had it. I don't know. But bottom line is, I would imagine you come around to coping. Let's talk about coping with polio or with a disability. Something you need to accept and adapt your life to it. So how do you do that, Constance?
Well, I think coping probably has a lot of emotional, mental issues related to a response to what's physically happening to you. And because we all had polio, or most of us had polio at such a very young age, I always tell people I feel very blessed and very lucky because I did not have a long lifespan of perfectly healthy and then something happened to me. I never looked at the world the same way as the healthy folks around me because I always had to deal with adaptive things. I had to figure out another way to navigate stairs. I had to figure out another way to get my winter clothes on because I grew up on the outskirts of Chicago. So we had those ugly winters that I have managed to escape from. I had to figure out how to navigate a world that had zero adaptability for me. And I had to do it from such a very young age that I honestly never thought about it in any other way. So while everybody talks about having a plan A to get something done, I never bothered with plan A. I always went immediately to what do I have to adapt? Go, what's plan B look like? What does plan C look like? Sometimes I had to work my way through the alphabet to find something that would work for me. And I think I learned that very, very young because although I was just a bit of a toddler when I had the polio at the very end of the epidemic in the outskirts of Chicago, my first operation, I was at age 5. And first of all, you're very, very young. Second of all, you're in the mid 1950s in the United States. So where you think civilization looks one way in the United States and a different way in Canada or England or Scotland or Africa, the ironic part about it is being in a hospital when you are a child in the 50s is a very different life experience than being a child in a hospital today. I think that's true the world over. It may look different in different countries and continents, but it's different. For me, it wasn't a regret, but it was a learning style, a learning mode that I had to do for a mindset. I had to adapt because at that age, the adults did not think about me as having anything to contribute to the conversation. So stuff was done to me. And I was considered expected to be the passive, keep your mouth shut, let them do what they know. They are the doctors, they know best. The added complexity for me was I didn't speak English. So I'm getting wheeled down for my first operation away from the only 2 people I know who are crying, and I don't understand why, by strangers in gowns and masks to a place where I don't know what's going on. They can't explain anything to me. And even if they tried to, I couldn't understand. So my first surgery experience was complicated by that extra element. My husband says that's why I don't stop talking now because I'm still practicing. Basically, for me, in terms of regrets, it's more a matter of figuring out ways to adapt. I learned at age 5 that no one would be able to advocate for me except me. So it was a mindset shift. It was more that than anything physical. I had to speak to my teachers, my principal as a child and say, no, I can't be tardy. I have to be able to be given extra time to navigate the stairs from the first floor class to the second floor class. I had to be able to do that at a very, very young age alone because nobody around me knew how to do that. So for me, the mindset of advocacy was really more than any kind of a sense of regret or apology or feeling bad. It was a challenge for me. It was like, oh, really? Well, that's how you handle it. I'm going to figure out a way to handle it my way. And whether I was in a brace or in a wheelchair or on crutches, navigating the world through 21 operations across 4 states, because I also had operations at the Mayo Clinic and at Shriners Hospital. And that was back in the day when it was called Shriners Hospital for Crippled Children. Thank you. In the old days. Yeah, I had to learn to adapt. I had to learn to find other ways. So I married a husband who was a Marine, and the motto of the Marines is adapt, improvise, and overcome. I said, I found my spiritual brother. That's what I've spent my whole life doing, adapting, improvising, and overcoming. So I'm not sure about regrets. I think we each find our own path and we do the best we can with what we've got until we know better, and then we do better.
Very, very good. The thing is that I think a lot of people kind of, sometimes, a lot of people, but some people put themselves through, what would my life be if I didn't have the disability, which is probably a silly process to go through because your life is what your life is at this moment. And actually, I was talking, doing an interview yesterday with one of our club members, Mark Stoddard, who has dyslexia, and which is a learning disability. And somebody asked him, about curing it. And he said, if they gave me a pill to cure it, I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want it. I'm happy at who I am at this moment. And I think that's important for all of us to be happy with what we have and make the most of it. And Constance, I have found in this adventure that I've been on, or journey with the club, that people with disabilities are actually stronger people than people without disabilities. And you found that also? Or do you find that in yourself? I mean, you have a lot of challenges that other people don't, and I'll let you answer the question.
Okay, well, I'll answer it very quickly. I'm sure many of the other polio survivors, both in this group and globally, can tell you a different kind of word message, but the mental message is the same. Again, I go back to the mental. And that is my doctors, my physical therapists, my medical care people brainwashed me at a very young age to believe that in order for me to be able to accomplish half of what a normal person could accomplish, I had to work twice as hard. So if you think about that as a mindset, I don't care what the disability is. In my case, it was polio, could have been cerebral palsy, could have been ALS, could have been anything else. The fact that you have that as your mental mindset from a very impressionable age, you look at the world differently. They say statistically there are more type A personalities among polio survivors than any other disability. And I suspect that message we all heard in some different variation speaks to that. So from the standpoint of courage, from the standpoint of toughness, the standpoint of grit, number one, we never knew anything other than that because it hit us so young. That was our life, period. Number two, because we were so brainwashed to believe we had to work harder to be able to get half as much benefit, we ended up becoming much more assertive, much more active, much more diligent, much more resourceful. And I think for many of us, that was a life message, not just a get over the disability message. It complicated the situation for us more so than for people with dyslexia, that's known as the invisible disability type group, because ours was very physically visible. I walked with a limp every step of my life once I had polio. I was in a wheelchair. I was in crutches. Everybody who saw me knew something was wrong with me. Back in the old days on television, the first disabled television character was in Gunsmoke, that Western TV series, and he was the deputy or something. His name was Chester. So more than not, I was called Chester in the hallways as a point of ridicule. because I walk with a limp. We learn those kinds of adaptive ways to cope with a situation that is handed to us throughout our lives. I would walk alongside my mother growing up, and I would fall because my knee would give out or my ankle would give out, and I would be on the ground before anybody realized it. They would be talking at me, and I'm down on the ground, and they're looking down at me. I've done that all my life. I'm in a wheelchair more often than not now, but even when I walk with my brace, I still struggle to make sure I don't fall. Those are just the adaptive things we've learned and that we've learned to cope with as a natural part of living with where we are now. And it wasn't just the polio, it's now more so because it's the post-polio. I find the things I'm reaching for, I have to reach for carefully because my shoulder rotator cuff injuries from all those years in wheelchairs, manual wheelchairs before they were electric, and pushes, wore out my rotator cuff, wore out my good leg because it was my weight-bearing leg. Put me in a position to now I'm looking at an orthopedist who wants to do knee replacement, hip replacement, and 2 shoulder replacements. I feel like I'm a bull in a bullfight. They want to replace everything. The bottom line is we learn from what we've experienced and we do what we can to take it forward and find adaptive ways and to find ways to cope with whatever it is that we've got at that moment in time. I think the hard thing for me, the biggest thing right now with the post-polio syndrome issues are the fatigue and the pain, because the pain is so pervasive and it's so unpredictable. When I go to my pain management doctor and the nurse asks, well, what's your pain level today? They are still thinking in the mindset of you broke something or you have an injury and there's a pain level for that. So my answer to her is always, what part of my body are you asking about? Because if it's my right shoulder, it's a 9. If it's my left shoulder, it's a 6. If it's my right knee, it's a 9. You know, pick a body part and it's a different number, because if the wear and tear in the post-polio is so different than having just my leg affected from the polio virus itself. So that puts everybody in a very different mindset. When I see my physical therapist, they want to make me stronger and better and help me recover. And I have to keep telling them, look at who you're talking to. I'm not going to get better. I just want you to help me get worse slower. And that is a huge mindset for them. They don't understand that. They have to keep being reminded. So my job as my own advocate and the advocate of everybody else that I come in contact with is to help them understand. That's why every time my doctor brings in his university student trainees, I will spend an hour after my appointment with my doctor doing a one-on-one course conversation about you're looking at someone who had polio. You're looking at someone who is dealing with post-polio now. Let me get into history and let's talk about what we can do together so you know what's going on beyond just a paragraph in one book, if you're lucky.
John, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Constance. I've got no regrets at all as to what happened. What happened to me happened, and it's made me who I am, and I am who I am, and I think it made me stronger.
Yep.
There is only, I agree with you. There's a lot of type A personalities inside of the polio, and I call it the polio worldwide family. But there are an awful lot. In fact, there are far more people who do not get heard who are in that worldwide polio family. You go out and go and look at the film Every Child, which was done by which was done some years ago. It's a bit difficult to get hold of, but I think it's available on Amazon Prime in the States. And you go through that. I don't regret a thing. The other thing is people turn around and say, oh, well, you've got an agree with Constance again. I had to learn how to do things. And the school that I went to, and sometimes you see a picture of my old school behind me, it had a tower in it, and there was an upstairs classroom, which I had to go to, which was about 3 floors up. That was fine. I could go up the main staircase. Coming down was a bit more of a problem. I just made sure that I had a tin tray at the top and came down the spiral staircase on my backside, and did it that way. But people have got to learn. People are still learning, and we've got to go through, and the ones who are here and the other ones who are around, we have to actually speak for the silent majority of polio
Mhm.
around the world. It is beholden to us to do that. I landed up just very quickly. I landed up at the age of 34, having to step down as the commercial director of a multinational company employing over 300,000 people because post-polio caught up with me. You also have to learn to cope with the type of thing, and a lot of people do it, and some of the support groups do it, that's when people actually have to step down, they do things like that. What happens? They suffer a bereavement, and they get it is a bereavement which goes through, and you have to learn to do it. And some of the countries, some of the support groups around Europe, they offer counselling, and it's rather like being based on bereavement counselling.
Mhm.
And that's,
Because
thank you, John. That's great, because one of the things I wanted to add to what you just said, because that's so 100% spot on. It's bereavement, but even before bereavement, you have to go through this whole grief process. There's denial. I can't tell you how many years I spent in denial, needing a handicapped placard to get preferential parking because my brain kept saying, "You're not disabled."
Mhm.
don't worry, I still go through, I still argue like hell about having to do things in particular ways. And the other point, one of the differences, you get a lot of people
Hello.
looking at me in a wheelchair and somebody else in a
Okay, I'll
wheelchair,
be there.
and you land up with a situation whereby they may be a spinal lesion. They've had an accident. They've had a trauma accident, and people teach them how to do things. Nobody was around when we were children to teach us how to do anything. You hit the floor, your father said, "Get up."
Get up.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
couldn't do something. In fact, the only person who ever taught me anything at all when I was young was the bloke who taught me to drive, and he did that. And he took me out in this adapted car and said, "I've got the perfect place for you to learn to drive. Nice wide roads, very quiet, not very many people around." Took me to the city municipal cemetery, and I drove around the road. But that was the first person who actually taught me anything and went through on that. I've had medical professionals here today, and I'm still teaching them what to do, and you can't do this and you can't do that.
Mhm.
And Mona, I want to get over to you. I know you had your hand up, and I do have a question for you too, but well, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to say that with all that we've heard, the most important thing we need to talk to people with polio is about how to support ourselves, how to adjust to what we need and not what others think we need. And this is what I'm hearing from the people talking today. And that's where another passion of mine has come in, is to support people. And when people talk about your pain level, I like to talk about it as my discomfort, because if I talk about it as discomfort, I have changed my mindset. And by talking to people all around the world about polio and about the post-polio syndrome, we have to look at it at a different way. When we're talking about people in the third world, Africa, Nigeria, India, they are people who are much younger than our American and Canadian people. And we got polio when we were babies. Maybe they got them when they were babies, but they are a much younger people. And if we can help to advise them on how to change our needs today, before we get post-polio, we will be ahead of the game. It is now trying to readapt to what we were told as children, to just keep going. As Nike says, just do it. Well, we need to just do it in a different way. And that's what support is all about. And that is what I'm all about, is talking to people about supporting you in the way that you need to be now, not what was or how you grew up like Constance with many operations and all kinds of things without any knowledge. I was treated the same way in the crippled children's school. Now children don't have that. But polio has changed the world, and we have changed the world medically, scientifically, in every aspect. Orthopedic surgery is because of us. Let's change orthopedic surgery for those in the future. More people with braces today are people who have sport injuries. Well, we need to re-advise people in sports about how not to injure themselves. We had to learn that, and we have to continue to learn that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I want to touch upon too, people who do not have polio and misunderstand polio. Mona, and I'm directing this to you. And for one example, I would think is that people are afraid to be around you because they don't want to catch polio. I mean, what are some of the misunderstandings and how do you deal with it?
The misunderstanding is that people think that illnesses, well, viruses are contagious, especially now that we have COVID around. But polio was a virus, it did affect you, and then later on, it went away. You were just left with the after effects. One of the other things I'm going to mention here is I would like people, ordinary people, to ask me if I need help. When I was a young mother with my children, I was walking out on the street and I slipped, as we all do. And this woman came running up to me, grabbed me by the arm and lifted me up. Well, I said, please, would you just let me get up on my own? What she did by lifting me up by my arm was she broke my arm.
Oh,
And what happened then is I yelled at her. I didn't know what to say except, I can't walk now. She was trying to be nice. People who are trying to be nice, you stop them and you say, I need help. This is how I need help. That's
Mhm.
important.
And I want to get just one or two other questions because we are running past the hour at this point. But I wanted to get back to Falami. And the one thing you had said, which we've heard this over and over again, that one of the good things about when you were a child with polio is you had good family support. It seems like oftentimes with people with disabilities, the family becomes really important to the development of that person. Do you want to touch upon that, Falami?
Yes, when I think when I had the polio at 4 months, my parents, they knew that this was polio, and they would rather treat me even more than my siblings. They don't want me to complain, they don't want me to do this, they don't want me to do that. And even in terms of education, they were ready to give me the best of education because, and I was able to push myself because I wasn't seeing myself as a disabled. I was able to push myself that no, I'm going to get to the stage where I'm going to have a master's, and then I want to. I think of making the best out of myself because I think the polo itself has taught us one thing: that get the best out of yourself, make something out of yourself. And I had the support of my family. I had the support of my family. I had everything with them. And but comparing it to the ordinary man or the ordinary woman in Nigeria, the moment you don't have support from people, they take you as a if you're a beggar. There was a time I think I fell down and somebody was trying to give me one kind of help. And I said, no, you don't do that. I said, you don't do that. I can help myself, and I'm not begging for money. I'm disabled, yes, but I've got the best assistance that I needed. What's the problem with Africa, especially Nigeria? They tend to look at the disabled people as, especially when you don't have a family to help you, they tend to look at you as someone that needs help and you need to be pitied. And that was one thing my parents and my siblings never did. I did everything myself. Thank you.
Thank you. And there seems to be two things we're approaching here today. One is the person who has the polio, and we will use the word before coping with it, both physically and mentally. And the other thing is for those who do not have polio and don't understand it. And there's a need to bring awareness to those people that are misunderstanding what it's all about. And I think this discussion can go on for hours about that. And I must appreciate it. Are there any final thoughts that any of you would like to share to those who are watching today and maybe watch the recording afterwards about polio? Is there any of you have some final thoughts there?
People with polio are no different to the rest of humanity. We are black, white, green, yellow. We can have bad tempers. We can have good days. We can have good relationships. We can have bad marriages. We can have children. We can do anything. There are people, I've known people with polio who are actually locked up in jail because they're criminals. There is absolutely no difference. We are just a reflection of humanity who happened to catch a virus, who happened to do things to us, and we have got on with our lives. Whether we would have turned out any differently, nobody ever knows. And we will never know. Just treat us like normal people.
Thank you, John. That's a good closing statement. Dick, you have your hand up.
Well, the point being is that all of we polio survivors need to jump in and teach the medical community about what we have and how to help us and how to not help us. And that is, impacts India and Africa more so than the United States. But the common complaint I continually hear is that, I can't find a physical therapist or otherwise that understands and doesn't do things to me that shouldn't be done. So, that's one of the areas where the advocacy of this group and others is so important.
Thank you, Dick. And Nalish?
Yes, on great discussion. Somebody spoke about regret. I think, as a person with cerebral palsy, and having congenital cerebral palsy, the entire thing of regret doesn't come. You regret something when you have an option. You have done something you should not have done, or you are in a position where you have some alternatives. This is what I have been leading all my life. How can I regret something that another option was never given to me? So the thing is, you deal with life with the cards that you have dealt with. You just do what is good to you at that moment. So there is no option of regret. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Nalish. Constance?
Yeah, if I may, Ken, the one thing I would probably add is, and it's because as polio survivors, we have lived with this imbalance all of our lives. We have a very different perspective than folks wrestling with different effects of COVID right now. But in many respects, there are similarities. So I would ask us to keep that in mind. Use the expertise of the people who have lived a life where advocacy was the same as breathing. We learned how to advocate for ourselves, literally, from our first conscious thoughts and our first conscious breaths. Let us consolidate all of those things that we have learned over the decades and the millennia for our collective lives and let us give you a kind of a roadmap of how you can have those conversations positively with your doctors and your therapists and your everybody who comes to help you, whether it's a family member or whether it's a physician. It doesn't make any difference. There's much we can teach them if we approach it from a way of, here, this may help you understand why this works or doesn't work for me. And I've worked very, very hard all my life, as we all have, to build positive relationships with our doctors. Occasionally we've had to fire some of them because they just simply wouldn't learn. But the bottom line of the matter is, we can help a lot of other people. That's why, for me, this organization is so key. Polio can kind of be a roadmap to say, here's how every person with any disability can learn how to advocate for himself or herself in whatever the setting is, whether it is school or family or employment. We all have different issues, but they are so similar, we can help each other. So I really, really look forward to this group to be able to help pull together some of those ways and provide guidance to other folks.
Thank you. Thank you,
Let's learn to help ourselves. Let's learn to change our ways for the better. That's what we need to do. That's what support is all about.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. I have to leave. I'm supporting someone else right now. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mona. And Nima?
Yes, I'm sorry, my internet was somehow have a little trouble. Oh, my name is Nema. I'm from DRC Congo. Right now I'm in the United States. When I talk about, I see my brother from Nigeria talking about, and let me, as from Congo and as a woman, as a Black woman, we pass it through many challenges. As a polio survivor, as a woman, I born in a village where we was no wheelchair. I didn't have a toilet. And when I got polio when I have 2 years old. And when I got to be young lady, young woman, young girls, to go to school was no way. I didn't have a wheelchair. I didn't have any kind of support. And the people saying is kind of lost cause. I was lost cause on my family, relative, but I got a chance. I have my mother who loves me so much. I really respect women, any kind of disability children have, always mother as supporting that. And I grown up when I begin that school was a really big big problem, but I grown up in love, in mothers. I was telling people was the polio helped me not to be slave of the culture, to be lost cause, but I have to study to finish primary school, secondary school, and university, and I serve my country. But we have still today, because we were saying dedicated or polio. In my country, we still have a kid who have a polio. And to be disability is a kind of shame. Like my dear sister who left our group said, let's learn how to be positive. We do that positive things, and we try to contribute our best. You can't feel like, oh, today I'm down, but you still helping other people to be, you can be able to contribute in a community, in a society, in your household. And that is really kind of where my last word I can say, let's continue in a positive way to be teaching other people, and also how we as African until today, I grown up when I went to boarding school was the stairs and the stairs. I sleep to one level, I start to another level, I goes down to eat in another level. And all this, I walk on a stick. I can feel down maybe twice a day or not feel down, but I lived with that until I got my first crutches in South Africa in 2007. When I was on maybe, I was working, I was technical advisor to national minister. I was maybe 40s something. My first crutches. I was like born again to have crutches. Until today, I have many sisters, many relatives, people with a disability who doesn't have a wheelchair, who doesn't have crutches. And I'm still really kind of, sometimes I have my electrical wheelchair, and when I'm going to Bukavu in my town, it's like I'm queen. And sometimes I feel shame to walk with that wheelchair because no one else have those. Many cars, they stop it. If we have way to continue to give the word out, is looking kind of how can bring little light. This is our group. We can go to Rotary, Globally Rotary Foundation, supporting us to be maybe my brother who lives in Nigeria. He can maybe help me to give that message to help other people have access, any little access, maybe wheelchair or toilet. That is really, for me, was big issues. And when I have now toilet, and I have my wheelchair, I can walk day and night to let other people with disability have access to little things, toilet and wheelchair. Thank you so much for this really big meeting. And we meet a big personality here in this group. We have people who have access to resources. We really, I beg, because sometimes they say we beg, because the people cannot give us like audience or like where we are looking for, but I learn also myself to fight. No one else who will fight for me, but myself. I learn how to fight, how to get access, but I get a kind of, when you still consistently request that you get to get. But if you can, we can get like mobilize resources to get people with disabilities to have access to wheelchair and the toilet. That will be my best things I can do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nima. Thank you very much. Thank you all for all you do too. She runs a wonderful group there in the Congo. And also makes me think too that maybe we should, or some group should do a session on being a parent of a child with disabilities, and talk about, because it's so important. It's so important. You mentioned it, and many other people have mentioned it too, of the importance of your mother in your life. And I think the parent is very important in the life of a child with disabilities. So it's something to look into. If there are no other comments, we are past the hour, but it was extremely interesting. And people have been watching this on Facebook, and we'll have the recording available too to help other people better understand living with polio, and the people who have lived with polio. As I said in the beginning, eradication is so important, and God bless Rotary for what they've done. But we also need to focus on those people who have polio. So much thank you. I'm going to shut down this meeting, and much appreciated. Once again, we are the Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy, and we're out there working on human rights for people with disabilities around the world.
Ken,
Yes.
quick question. In the chats, there have been some sidebar conversations with email exchanges.
Right.
So will that be shared with the video, or is that something we need to save?
It will be saved. The chats are always saved, so we can have that chat available. So there were some great comments in those chats, and I would have addressed them, but because of the lateness of the hour,
No,
I didn't
that's fine.
really get into it. But Sonia will be in touch with you, because Sonia said PPS is not known in Kenya. So that's one of the things we want to work on. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day. And Elliot, if you can stay for a few minutes, I know John wants to talk to you for a second. So,
Thank you. Good day.
okay. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Alright,
It was
thank you
good to
all.
connect with
Thank you.
everybody, and thank you so much for sharing your story.